Okay, we're doing something different today in that this is not gonna be a highly polished reel. In fact, it's gonna be a real-time edit of my process inside of Lightroom Classic to create a cinematic color grade on one of the images that you guys submitted to me a couple weeks ago. And to give you a little sneak peek, we're gonna take the image from this to this in just a few minutes together. So, you know, maybe jot down some notes as we go, or just save this video for the next time you need it. And if anybody wants to pick up a copy of my Pro presets, they're in my store, so just comment the word Pro, and then I'll shoot you a link to your DMs. This first one is from Becco Ibanez. This is a great cinematic capture, my friend. If you look at the metadata of this shot up by the histogram, this was shot at ISO 1000. That's obviously because they were using available light in the location. It was a 50mm at f2.0. That's how you get that separation between the subject and the background, and this buttery, soft, bokeh-y backdrop that everybody loves so much. The shutter speed was 1/160, which is a great speed to be at because you're allowing the ambient light to play into the shot, but you're not so slow that you're capturing a lot of motion blur. So overall, great settings. Becco, you did a great job capturing this image. First and foremost, the white balance is a little bit warm, not that it's off whatsoever. I think we can drop it a little bit more because I want to take the edge off some of the oranges and yellows and the skin tones. That way when we apply the preset, we're at a better starting place for seeing what's happening in the shot. So I'm gonna take my white balance, I'm gonna cool it down a little bit more, probably closer to 3000. And then my tint is at +7. It's a little too magenta. Let's just take that to 0. Great, that feels much better. And now the preset I'm gonna use for this is my CRP2 Pro preset, and that's because it brings out the blues and kind of creates a little bit of that cinematic color grade. So let's go to Pro preset number 2 on this. And you can see the switch happens right away. I'll show you here before, after. So I'm gonna click CRP2. Now what that did was applied all of my preset settings onto this image. Presets are not a one-click, one solution, typically. Most of the time you select a preset and then you need to fine tune it to make it work with your image, depending on what your light was that you shot with and your location and all the variables that come into play with a shot. There's obviously some color things that we need to do, but one thing that happens here is once the contrast came into play, the image feels a little bit darker. Let's balance the shot out just a little bit. So I'm gonna grab my exposure, which is currently at 0.4. That's the exposure setting that came with the preset. And I'm just gonna slide it up. It's gonna bring up everything in the shot. And I'm gonna say, let's double it. Let's put it at 0.8. Somewhere like that. Okay, that feels good. Now what I want to do is start separating her from the background even more. And to do that, we're going to use a layer mask. And the layer masks are right here on the top right, this little dotted wheel. Click that, it's gonna open up our masking options. And all I'm gonna do is select background and let Lightroom do its magic by selecting just the backdrop. Okay, it did a really nice job. Now everything in this panel that we change is only changing the backdrop. It's not changing the model or the settings on her exposure whatsoever. So what I wanna do here is bring down our exposure a little bit because I want the backdrop to feel darker than our model, so it feels like she's sort of in a pool of light. So I'm gonna drop this just a little bit, -0.3, yeah, something like that. And then let's go down to our whites. I want the whites to pop and I want the blacks to darken, and that's just pulling the contrast a little bit extra in the backdrop, which is gonna make all this cinematic bokeh stand out even more. So the whites, let's push it up to say 13. And the blacks, I'm gonna go the exact opposite direction, about the same amount. So let's drag the blacks back to -13, something like that. There it is before, deselect, there it is after. And you can see we just darkened the background, we deepened the contrast, but we didn't affect the model, and that's helping her pop off the screen that much more. Let's get out of the masking section by going back to our regular sliders here. I'm gonna go into a panel that seems to intimidate a lot of photographers, and that is the calibration panel. A lot of photographers don't touch this panel because it seems intimidating, but honestly, it's a great superpower when you're editing things like skin tones and overall colors in your shot. First of all, the shadow tint I'm not gonna touch, but I can go to my red primary, green, or blue primary channels, and I can shift these around and see just how drastically it pulls the tint in the shot. But if you were to just push it a little bit in one direction or another, you can fine tune the colors that you wanna see out of your image. I'm gonna take this, and if I go this way, it gets really green. If I go this way, it gets really purple. Obviously, we don't want either of those, but I might push it to the right just a little bit, it feels good. And all that's doing is taking my reds and pushing them a little bit more orange. And on the saturation, I'm just gonna dial it back a little bit because I don't want them to be overpowering. Okay, let's move down to the green primary channel. And again, I'm just gonna grab the lever, slide it all the way one way and the other just to see what effect it's having. All the way to the right, that's what it does. All the way to the left, it goes way too green. So let's push it to like 0.5 maybe. And then the saturation, I'm gonna give it a little bit of an extra boost. Let's go to plus 18 or so. Now let's move down to the blue primary. So in this case, if I push it this way, it's gonna push the blues more navy, more purple. And if I push it the opposite way, it's gonna push the blues more teal, more aqua. And I think that's the direction I wanna go with this. 5 to the left, just a bit to give that teal effect. And then on the saturation, I'm gonna really pull that back. Take it pretty far, minus 47. I'm gonna do one more thing with this, and that's gonna be fine tuning our colors that we want in the shot. So let's go to our color mixer. And you can see there's already adjustments being made to the shot based on what the preset brings into it. But let's say we wanna undo those and just bring in the colors we really wanna see and to what level we wanna see them. So I'm gonna literally zero all of these out under the saturation tab. And you can see when I do that, it's not a totally black and white image because there's a color grade attached to this. And that's coming from our color grading panel here, where the blues are pulled in the shadows and the midtones are pulled the opposite direction a little bit. So now what we can do is go back to our color mixer under the saturation and push each color just as far as we want it to go. So in the reds, I'm of course gonna bring those back. Those are gonna be in parts of the skin tones, her lips, things like that. So let's drag that up until it feels comfortable. Orange is her skin tone, we obviously need that, so I'm gonna punch that up as well, and that's gonna bring back her face, maybe minus 7, something like that. Again, not overpowering. I don't want any color to just, you know, overtake the shot. Yellows, that's gonna be somewhat of the skin tone again, so I'm gonna bring that in, but not a ton. I don't want a lot of yellow in the shot, just a little bit. I'm gonna take this to, say, minus 50. There's not a lot of greens happening in this shot. We can see if I just pull this up, maybe a little bit in the bokeh in the background, but I don't think I want it. It just kind of distracts from the colors that are in the shot and the colors that I want to be prominent. So I'm gonna leave green at 0. There's not a lot of aqua in this shot. Let's leave it at 0. How about blue? Let's bring that up to, say, minus 10. Okay, now we've adjusted each color in the shot independently of one another and found what we like for this image. Now, if you remember right at the beginning, we created a layer mask and affected the contrast of the background, but we didn't affect our model. To fully balance this out, I'm gonna create one more layer mask, and this time we're gonna select our subject. So up here in the layer masks, create new mask, select subject this time, and now what we're gonna do is deepen the shadows and the blacks of just our subject to match the contrast of the background. I'm gonna slide down here, and we're gonna pull our shadows back just a little bit, maybe minus 5. And then our blacks, that's gonna be in the shirt, in the shadows around her hair. I'm gonna wrap that back as well. Something like that. Okay, the next thing I'm gonna do here is sharpen the image, but I don't wanna blanket sharpen it. I wanna sharpen just the parts of the shot that I want to be more prominent. Under the masking slider, that's the most important slider when you're sharpening. I'm gonna press the Option key, I'm gonna grab it, and when I slide, the image goes black and white, and we catch just the edge detail. So the further I slide this, the more you can fine tune where you want that sharpening to go. Let's punch it to there so it's just the edge detail. You're getting her eyes, her lips, her hair, things of that nature. I'm gonna push the sharpening. I'm not gonna be afraid to bring it up quite a bit. Let's put it at like, maybe around 90, something like that. Great, and now we've got a pretty complete image. We did that in just a few minutes by creating our own color grade using a preset and then adjusting everything to our specifications. Here's the before, totally raw image. And here's the after, sort of a cinematic color grade for that orange teal effect. And I think it looks really great. Congrats, Becco, on the great capture. I'm gonna send you my edit of this and my CRP Pro presets. If anybody else wants a copy of the presets, comment Pro below and I'll send you the link to your DMs. All right, y'all, I'll catch you in the next one.